Doctor Who Season 2 is absolutely insane. We're talking everything from a dancing cartoon to a barbershop powered by storytelling, and yes, the surprise return of Billie Piper? What? In this video, you'll see me break down each episode week by week, discussing what works and what didn't work, and I will give it a score out of 10. And make sure you stick around to the end because I'll do a final review of all my scores, and spoiler alert, things do change. When robots from outer space kidnap nurse Belinda Chandra, the Doctor embarks on an epic intergalactic quest to get his new friend back home to Earth. I was very excited to watch this episode, not only because Doctor Who was my favourite show in all of time and space, but because this is the first time ever that I would have been able to watch Doctor Who on a Saturday. Because I live in Australia and the UK usually gets Doctor Who on a Saturday, which means Australia gets it on a Sunday, or even worse, in the Chibnall era, we got Doctor Who on a Monday, like first thing Monday morning. Ay, ay, ay. But thanks to this Disney deal, I get Doctor Who at 5 p.m. on Saturdays, which is crazy. That's never happened. But I had been invited to one event this year, and in all seriousness, I've been invited to one event this year, and the event was on the 12th of April and started at 5 p.m. This was my best friend's engagement party, and he timed it to the minute that Doctor Who starts. It was crazy. I rocked up to the engagement party and got this notification on my phone. It was taunting me, begging me to come home and watch the episode. But I had a great time at this event and got home very late and was like, I just need to sleep. I'm not in the right frame of mind to be watching Doctor Who. So I got up first thing Sunday morning and watched the brand new Doctor Who, maybe a little hungover, but I watched it regardless. I gotta say, I got some mixed feelings on it, but we will start with the good. New companion Belinda Chandra, played by Verita Sethu, is the standout for me, absolutely. I am a little bit worried about her character, but we'll get into that later. She just feels fresh. She's more of a grounded companion. She's in her 30s, independent, skeptical, practical, and it truly feels like a complete 180 from Ruby Sunday, which is what I think the show needed. She seems to just want to jump into action in a crisis and questions the Doctor. That's what I love. They're not best friends straight away. She actually has some conflict with the Doctor, and it's good TV. She's not in love with him. She's really skeptical of the guy. And this episode kind of breaks the mold for like a new companion introduction. Like Belinda's like in space in the first 6 minutes of the episode, and the Doctor and Belinda kind of meet in space. We're not setting this story in modern day London. It is just balls to the wall space adventure, and it was fun to witness. Also, it goes without saying, Ncuti Gatwa feels very comfortable in the role. It almost feels like we didn't get as much Ncuti that we could have had this episode. Maybe that's just me, but he's always just a delight to see on screen. Very charismatic, and I can see the dynamic of this, Doctor and companion becoming something really, really cool. There are so many good ideas in this episode. It's overwhelming. We've got robot warfare, AI satire, incel commentary. This episode is truly chock-a-block, and we'll talk more about that later as well. I thought the robots looked fantastic. I love it when Doctor Who do big and bulky robots. There were just some great practical suits. I absolutely love that stuff. They reminded me of the robot in the Husbands of River song, just big, bulky, and red. I'm just listing the good stuff here. I'm not going to give you a play-by-play of the episode. You've already seen the episode, I hope. If you haven't, why did you click on this video? It's very spoilery. I love it when Doctor Who gets off Earth because the show tends to spend a lot of time in London. I thought it was cool that this planet kind of, had this myth about Belinda Chandra, and she's like their queen. She is their queen. And they call themselves like Miss Belinda Chandra kind, and they've got Miss Belinda Chandra bombs. That's so funny. It's very Doctor Who-y, it's very camp, and it's awesome. I thought that was cool. And the twist reveal at the end kind of worked for me. I don't know, it felt somewhat earned. Like her ex-boyfriend being the bad guy all along. He's a very controlling dude. I feel like it was a bit unclear, his like villain arc and like how much control he had and what the twist really meant, but I don't know. Watching it, I was like, oh damn, okay, that's something. Padam Padam reference is always good in my books. Plus, the ending absolutely hit. The final frame where we see the taxi floating in space, the Statue of Liberty, the Eiffel Tower. It looks like, end of the world shenanigans again, but it absolutely hit. It was a very good end to a fairly complicated episode. But let's talk about the bad. I've got some criticisms. There is so much going on in this episode that you really kind of need a second viewing to take it all in. This episode really tries to juggle so many ideas. As I said before, it's got AI satire, incel commentary. We've got these weird time glitches and distortions. There's an intergalactic rebellion going on, and we're introducing a brand new companion, and there's somewhat of a mystery with her. It's a lot to pack into 46 minutes, because this episode truly feels like it's trying to cram 2 episodes into one. Really doesn't allow any breathing room for those like emotional beats that you get and would allow us to connect with the companion more. There really wasn't many quieter moments, which I understand because it's, it's a season opener. We gotta bang, bang, bang. We gotta go. But I like connecting with the characters more. And I'm worried about Belinda because they have set her up perfectly. As I said, I like my companions that have conflict with the Doctor, but they end up being best friends at the end of the day. Donna Noble and the 10th Doctor are the perfect example, and everyone goes back to them. Like, they were not romantically interested in each other. They weren't best friends straight away. There was this massive conflict between them, but at the end of the day, they loved each other and cared for one another. And I feel like we could be setting up something similar with Belinda. But I'm just worried that she's going to become another one of these mystery companions. Like last season, we had Ruby like, oh, who is her mum? What's her story? And that, for me, felt a little bit underwhelming in the end. We had the whole Impossible Girl thing with Clara Oswald. Like, we've done that. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with the whole Mundy Flynn, because Verita Sethu was in a previous episode. She was in Boom. They do address it in the episode, and I probably need to go back and rewatch, but I don't think it was fully resolved. It feels like this is something that's going to go on for a while. I just think for Belinda, like, her best pitch as a character is like, hey, she's a companion. She doesn't want to be here. She just wants to get home. That's great. And she questions the Doctor. We don't really need the mystery element on top of it all, but I feel like we're only adding the mystery element because Verita was cast in a previous episode, and then they were like, hey, you're really good. Let's get you back for this, but we have to try and like rework it so it makes sense narratively. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. I just don't want the mystery to overshadow her character, which is what I kind of felt like happened with Ruby and kind of happened with Clara at the start of her journey. And I haven't really seen anyone talking about this, but I feel like Belinda took like going to outer space and robots and spaceships in her backyard just kind of in her stride. Like she was kind of fine with it. She's like, oh yeah. I truly wish we kind of had more time with her before she got on the spaceship, kind of see what her personal life is like, what her work life is like. Those scenes happen very, very quickly, and I feel like there could have been something in those earlier scenes that could kind of explain why she's so kind of nonchalant with going on a spaceship. Like maybe she could have been into aliens and conspiracy theories, or when she was a young child remembered a spaceship crashing into Big Ben or something like that. I don't know. For me at the start, I was like, wow, she is taking this like an absolute champ. If a robot came crashing into my house and was like, we're going to take you, I'm running. I'm getting out of there. I'm calling the cops straight away. She just kind of walks along with them. It doesn't look like she's really been detained. She does ask Miss Flood to call the police, which is quite a funny bit of dialogue. And also I should mention that Mrs. Flood was in this episode. I hope they solve that mystery this season. Because we'll see if Doctor Who gets any more seasons, but that's a different video. But Mrs. Flood, she's fine. I'll take it or leave it at this point. I just hope it's a good resolution when we finally figure out who she is. I think the Robot Revolution is a bold, idea-packed episode that introduces a refreshingly grounded companion in Belinda Chandra, but its overstuffed plot and lack of emotional breathing room kind of hold this episode back from being the companion debut it could have been. But I will say it was miles better than Space Babies. It was light years ahead of Space Babies, so I think that's good. Hang on. I think there's a robot in my backyard. Okay, well, I'm going to give the Robot Revolution a 6.5 out of 10. That's my official rating. Please let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. The Doctor's quest to get Belinda home takes the TARDIS down to Miami in 1952, where an abandoned cinema is hiding a terrifying secret. Can the Doctor uncover Lux's power? Alright, well there's no point messing around, we're just going to get right into the review. I'm going to talk about the good, and then I'm going to talk about the bad, because I do have a few things to say about this episode. Actually, before I get into it, I should mention, long-time viewers of the channel will be like, Crispy, where the heck are you? I'm on holidays right now at the Gold Coast in a pretty
interesting apartment with my girlfriend and some friends. We're having a great time, but the apartment is crazy. And I am missing a beautiful breakfast right now because I am recording my review for Doctor Who Lux. Because I was very tempted to be like, oh, maybe I just won't do a review for this week. But no, we're committing to doing weekly reviews, even if that means filming in a dodgy hotel. So please subscribe to the channel for that level of commitment. And yeah, I hope that explains why I'm here and not at home. All right, let's talk about Lux. This episode was definitely a step up from last week. Last week was way too overstuffed. It was an overstuffed Oreo, much too sweet for me. This one, for the most part, was incredibly consistent, and I didn't find it very confusing to follow at all like last week. Last week I found it a bit confusing. This week, we were right in, and I had a great time. The pacing from the get-go had me hooked. I really enjoyed the dialogue at the start of the episode between Belinda and the Doctor. One of my main concerns going into this was that Belinda was just going to be like, all right, well, let's just go on another adventure. But no, they are being consistent with her character and she's like, I really want to get home. That's our whole thing. That's part of their marketing. I just can't believe this episode was written by the same man that wrote last week, because the pacing last week was just so fast that you missed everything. This week, they really took their time at the start. I know some people might have maybe found that boring, but I really enjoy it when Doctor Who takes its time, sets up the mystery, we introduce the characters, and then we get the inciting incident. And that is exactly what this episode did in the first act, and I thought it was absolutely stellar. As soon as they stepped out of the TARDIS, the Doctor was like, all right, I'm going to put this device here, and hopefully it can cast us a net right to 2025. And he's like, look, we got a couple minutes to kill. Let's go and look at the cinema. Oh, the cinema is locked. That's a bit strange. Oh, there's 15 people missing. And Belinda's like, all right, we are leaving now. We're going. But the Doctor, he is cheeky. You can't resist a mystery. And I kind of wish Belinda called him out more on that, kind of like she did last week. But I think she's kind of more on board with the idea of time travel and everything else, so it is exciting for her as well. But they go and have a harmless cup of coffee, realize there's something has gone wrong. My favorite line of dialogue is when the mum is like, oh, I just saw a police box rock up, and then the Doctor's like, does that give you hope? And she's like, yeah, I think it does. That's brilliant. That's really, really nice, because the TARDIS is a symbol of hope, and the Doctor likes to think that he is a symbol of hope as well. So it was kind of nice that it was the Doctor saying that the TARDIS and, he is a symbol of hope, because usually it's other people saying like, yeah, the Doctor, he saves planet, he is hope, but it's kind of nice seeing the Doctor being like, yeah, I do that. That's my job. Oh, and I should have mentioned that Lux probably has one of the best cold opens in Doctor Who. At least for RTD2, it's the best cold open. That was stellar. That was really, really nice. Creepy, absolutely terrifying. Mr. Ring-a-Ding, let's just talk about Mr. Ring-a-Ding. Absolutely insane animation. I can see where the Disney budget went, and it was for this episode. So expressive, so much fun. I enjoyed the 2D and the really, really cursed 3D. Genuinely a very, very terrifying Doctor Who villain. Which is funny because I have my concerns going into the season being like, oh boy, this Mr. Ring-a-Ding might be just a little bit cringe, a little bit on the nose. Absolutely not. Fantastic. Alan Cummings' voice performance for this role, second to none. Welcome back to Doctor Who, sir. You are welcome to stay. And I think Mr. Ring-a-Ding or Lux is probably my favorite god of the Pantheon thus far. I would say it goes Mr. Ring-a-Ding, the Toy Maker, followed closely by Maestro, and then a large gap, and then Sutek. Let me know in the comments below what your god ranking is. Thanks. But yeah, just an absolute presence on screen, Mr. Ring-a-Ding, and my favorite part of the episode, I say. And Shooty and Verita give fantastic performances as well. It was really good until it wasn't as good. Let's talk about the bad. All right, we have to talk about that scene. We all know what scene I'm referring to. It was bizarre. It's the scene in which the Doctor realizes he's in a TV show, and it's an incredibly intriguing concept. Unfortunately, I did hear rumors about something that might happen like this in this season, so it was spoiled for me a little bit, which I'm annoyed at. I thought it was a little bit cringe. But then it turned out that they were still in the film, and none of it was real. It was just Mr. Ring-a-Ding messing with the Doctor. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of back on board, because I truly thought that this was going to be like a timeless child event in Doctor Who, where the Doctor realizes he's part of a TV show, but no, it was all a simulation. So, phew. But the first act of this episode, as I said, had
perfect pacing. It was keeping a steady momentum. The mystery was building, and then we got to this gorgeous animated sequence. I really liked that sequence. And then they're flipping through the pages, and then we get to the Doctor finding out that he's in a TV show, and the episode just comes to a screeching halt. That momentum, that perfect pace that we were building, it just spends way too long on this scene, and I can understand why, because it's such a big idea. And I know Russell was sitting there like, I can't help but put in like a million ideas into this scene. Because we had them become self-aware because they're Doctor Who fans. Like, sure, they look up to the Doctor and have watched the Doctor. And, I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I like to think I'm better because I've seen Doctor Who. I think I'm a better person because I love this show. And then there's the whole, they realize they're a simulation, but they're gonna die. Like, these are all huge, big ideas, and you could probably do a whole episode just on this scene. And they kind of pack a whole episode's worth of ideas into that scene. But I just think that entire sequence needed to be a few minutes shorter. It needed to be like a passing by, like, shock value thing. I think we just sat in it a little too long. However, the Blink line was golden, where they're all like, yeah, my favorite episode's Blink. And Belinda's like, what is Blink? And he's like, it's an episode where you can't blink. She's like, sounds thrilling. The second week in a row that Russell's kind of had a dig at Stephen Moffat, because we had Blink this week, and last week the Doctor said timey-wimey, and Belinda was like, MI6. I think Belinda doesn't like Moffat's Doctor Who. That's canon. But yeah, my main gripe is just how much time that scene takes, and I think it's a little jarring, but damn it works. It's just slightly off-putting, but they get across the finish line. It is a nice, ode to us as fans. And being a long-time Doctor Who fan, I can appreciate the scene, but maybe I would have preferred a whole episode where they're in some kind of simulation and the Doctor is a TV show character. Rather than putting it into the middle of this episode, that probably could have worked better, in my opinion, as like a Scooby-Doo-esque mystery. Because that's what this episode is. It felt like an episode of Scooby-Doo up until that point. And then after the Doctor's in a TV show theme, we kind of rushed through the ending and the episode is wrapped up pretty quickly. I just think I would have liked more time with Mr. Ring-a-Ding. I understand that's expensive, but such a delight to see on screen. But I do feel like the episode kind of wrapped up pretty quickly. But it was nice, and I had a good time with it. Lux was an ambitious episode of Doctor Who, with gorgeous animation, excellent voice work, and an intriguing mystery to solve. But I do think it's let down by the second act completely stopping the momentum of the episode and having a rushed ending. But it was a fantastic watch regardless. And I think the most unrealistic thing about that episode was 3 Doctor Who fans all agreeing on the same favorite episode. Please. So I will be giving Doctor Who Lux an 8 out of 10, and even that seems harsh, but please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Far in the future, on a tough, brutal planet, a devastated mining colony has only one survivor. To discover the truth, the Doctor and Belinda must face absolute terror. Oh boy, I am excited to talk about this one. Let's start with the good. So last night I had some friends come over and we played some board games, and I truly thought that the night couldn't get any better. And then I put on this episode. It's a pretty darn good one. Not perfect, but pretty darn good. As soon as the episode started, I was actually surprised to see the Doctor and Belinda in their costumes from last week, but I absolutely loved it. This season is feeling so much more like connected and cohesive as a season than season 1 felt. By this time in season 1, we had that random like 6-month time gap. This time around, I truly feel like we're getting a bit more time with Belinda, a bit more time with the Doctor, and we're kind of going through the motions instead of, I don't know how to explain it. It just feels more intentional and put together, and, the use of the Vindicator thing being like, oh, we need to use this device to try and get us back to Earth. It's good. And this is the second week in a row that Belinda has brought up wanting to see her parents, and the Doctor's like, yeah, we're gonna see your parents and we're gonna have a great time, okay? That's the goal. So I truly hope by the end of season 2 that we will be able to see and meet Belinda's parents. I really hope that pays off, and I hope that's the vision for season 2. Get her home. It's worth mentioning that this week is the first episode of season 2 to be a co-written episode. So it's Russell T Davies and who else? Sharma Angel Waterfall. Is her last name Waterfall? That's awesome. As I said, this is the first guest writer of the season, and for RTD2, dare I say, for the most part, I've enjoyed the guest episodes more so than Russell himself, just like writing by himself. And this one is absolutely no exception. For Sharma's first time writing Doctor Who,
knocked it out of the park. Because this episode, without a doubt, is one of the best paced episodes of this season thus far. Maybe the entirety of RTD2. It was moving at a steady rate. It's definitely a slower episode, a bit more tension building, but I love that kind of stuff. I know some people are probably going to be like, oh my gosh, it was so boring. Nah, this episode had me on the edge of my seat. There was so much tension. I actually watched this episode with my Bluetooth headphones last night because my girlfriend wanted to go to sleep and I didn't want the, TV to be too loud, so I chucked my headphones on. And that was an absolutely brilliant decision from me because the sound design this episode is insane. And look, I've got to be real right now. I did actually get scared this episode on multiple occasions. What I was seeing on screen was terrifying, the sound design was terrifying, and I watched this pretty late at night. It was like midnight. This episode not only took itself seriously, but it was genuinely spooky. This is like some hide behind the sofa stuff. This is what Doctor Who's known for. I very much enjoyed the monster this week because, it did what Jaws did. You didn't actually see much of the monster. It was hidden in the background. It was just silhouettes and a lot of clever sound design. It was properly spooky. And it left it up to the imagination of the viewer as to how terrifying this thing is. And it's genius. It's genius. Look, I may as well talk about it. It's been the talk of the town for this episode. The Well is actually a sequel to the beloved 2008 classic Midnight. Currently ranked at number 12 on IMDb for the highest ranked Doctor Who episode, so it had quite large shoes to fill. Unfortunately, as a person that makes Doctor Who content online, I did hear murmurs and little whispers in my ear that this was in fact going to be a sequel to Midnight, so unfortunately that was spoiled for me. But man, oh man, that reveal scene, it still gave me goosebumps. It's pretty damn good. I suspect that the original script from Sharma, what was her name? Sharma Waterfall? Great name. Was just, about this monster that kind of is invisible and attaches to your back and can kind of go from person to person dependent on who they kill. It's such a good movie trope. Like, it's very much like those Smile movies, I guess, but a bit less dark and messed up. But I suspect that the script was like that and Russell saw that and was like, you know what? Let's make it a sequel to Midnight, and damn it, it worked. Was it as good as Midnight? No, but we'll get into that later. Before we do, there's still just like a lot that I love about this episode. It's nice to be excited about Doctor Who for once. The supporting cast I thought were absolutely fantastic. The ones that absolutely knocked it out of the park was Rose Ayling-Ellis as Alice Fenley. I really don't know how to pronounce her name. It's an Irish name. How do you pronounce it?
We are looking at how to pronounce these names and more confusing names, including Irish names, so stay tuned to the channel to learn more.
And Keelan Dunn absolutely crushed it this episode. But first of all, Rose Ayling-Ellis, what a performance. Completely drew you in. She was just genuinely a really good actress, no question. I know there's people going to be like, oh wow, this, The Well is the deaf episode of Doctor Who or whatever. Doctor Who had an excellent episode featuring a deaf actress 10 years ago, and it worked then, and dare I say, it worked better now. But in this case, Rose's disability wasn't just represented, it was woven into the plot in a meaningful and pivotal way. And her delivery of "Don't turn your back on me," oh man, that's brutal. And it works, like that line works so well in the episode as well because, the thing is attached to the back. I don't know, there was a lot of things to like about this episode. And as for Keelan, her sacrifice at the end was nothing short of phenomenal. I love that entire sequence. It was incredibly well shot. The music was perfect. Actually, the whole episode was really, really well done. So props to the director. There is just so much to like about this episode, but there were a few things that annoyed me. My biggest gripe with this episode is one that you might not be expecting, but it was Mrs. Flood. This annoyed me not only because it's like, I should have seen that coming, but we're doing the same thing that we did in season 1, because last season we had Susan Twist pop up every week, and then this time we've just got Mrs. Flood popping up every week. So we just have a lady that pops up in each episode of Doctor Who. I don't know, I feel like it lost its magic after the first time, and it didn't really pay off that well in Empire of Death. I hope this Mrs. Flood thing pays off a little bit more than that did, but now it's just like, oh, okay, get your bingo cards out. Here's Mrs. Flood's appearance for this week. I think in terms of season arcs for this season, it's more so getting Belinda home. That's the main season arc that I'm interested in, and getting Belinda back to her family so that her dad can do bad karaoke. I'm waiting for it. So that took me out of the episode a little bit, but I understand why they have to do it. And a minor pet peeve is that I don't think that the, when the monster attacks and the supporting cast go flying and they're all dying, I don't think that was as scary as they were hoping for. Maybe it came off a little bit goofy for me, but this is going to sound messed up. But what I thought they were going to do and what I think might work a little bit better is when they were walking behind Alice, I just thought that they were going to like crack every bone in their body and fall to the ground. Sounds grim, but I think that might have been scarier and worked better. And you don't actually have to show, them cracking every bone in the body. You can just hear it. But that's not to discredit the really cool stunt work and aerial work they did this episode. So it's neither here nor there. But a more major gripe for me was I'm not quite sure how the monster attack works, because I understand you have to be behind Alice and like in between the monster. I don't know how it works. I've only seen the episode the one time, but I think I'm still a bit confused as to how the mechanics of all that worked, because I swear at one point Alice did like a full 360 turn. And shouldn't that have killed everyone by doing that? I'm not 100% on that. If you know, let me know in the comments. But that's just a minor gripe. The Well was a spooky, well-acted, and perfectly paced episode of Doctor Who. The chilling villain that was tied to an old story felt surprisingly fresh rather than just, fan service. And it was yet another brilliant week of Doctor Who. And if we keep up at this rate, season 2 might end up being one of my favorite Doctor Who seasons. But with all that being said, I will be giving The Well a 9 out of 10. Ruby Sunday faces life back on Earth without the Doctor. But when a dangerous new threat emerges, can Ruby and Unit save her new boyfriend, Conrad, from the terrifying Shriek? Okay, well, I've got some good and I've got some bad to say about Lucky Day. Let's start with the good. So to start with, right off the bat, we get to see the Doctor and Belinda, which is huge because I wasn't quite sure if we were going to see them this episode, because this episode is very Ruby heavy. But we got to see them right at the start. We're still trying to get Belinda home. We're using the Vindicator machine, and I very much enjoyed that. And there is a world where the Doctor and Belinda just don't appear in this episode at all, but I'm glad that they do because it makes this whole season feel so connected. I very much enjoyed how each episode kind of links into the next one. But the Doctor and Belinda land in 2007, which is 17 years ago, by the way. That's a long time. I really like the idea of the Doctor and Belinda meeting Conrad when he's young in 2007, and him seeing the TARDIS disappear, and it's this very mysterious thing, and he gets a little bit obsessed with the police box and the Doctor and aliens and gets curious, and it becomes this obsession for him growing up. Now that I'm saying this out loud, doesn't it sound awfully similar to Love and Monsters? Like a kid has an interaction with the Doctor when he's younger, and he becomes obsessed with it as he grows up, and then he forms a group, and then he befriends one of the Doctor's friends. I don't know. There's some similarities there. This is Love and Monsters 2. Last week we had Midnight 2, this week's Love and Monsters 2. Conrad, who is a very interesting character, he becomes obsessed with aliens and starts his own podcast kind of talking about aliens, talking about Unit, and then eventually somehow gets Ruby on the podcast after some light stalking, which should have been the first red flag about this character. Do not trust this man. And Ruby goes on this podcast and gets involved in this guy's life because it seems that she's kind of like slightly traumatized from her time with the Doctor. And Ruby goes on Conrad's podcast and talks about the Doctor and her life with that. And it feels like almost therapeutic for her because she felt like, I think there was a quote in the episode where Ruby was like, I've got all this stuff in my head and I felt like I was going to explode. I've said it before that Ruby Sunday is not necessarily my favorite companion ever. The main drive for her in season 1 was, who is her mom? It was that whole mystery. And I felt that kind of overshadowed her character. I didn't really know what made her tick apart from, this longing to find her mom. But now that Ruby's found her mom, I was like, what else can we do with Ruby Sunday? So I really appreciate the direction they kind of took this in, and they made me care about Ruby Sunday. We don't often get a glimpse into the companion's life after they've traveled with the Doctor, and I enjoyed this angle where she's like, you know what, I've seen a lot and I question everything. If there's a light flickering, I go, is this an alien invasion or have I not paid my electricity bill? So I truly enjoyed that characterization of Ruby, and this is the most I've ever liked Ruby, and it's not even her season of Doctor Who. She's got PTSD, she's got a lot to process, and Conrad saw that and definitely took advantage of that. He was the shoulder to cry on. He was the person to confide in. Do not trust this man. So I really enjoyed what they did with Ruby this episode, which I was not expecting at all. And speaking of things I loved, that shot at the restaurant where Conrad and Ruby are on a date and Ruby's kind of describing what the Shriek do, that beautiful one take. Frame it, put it in a museum, I don't care. That was gorgeous. I was not expecting. It kind of stands out from the rest of the episode. The rest of the episode is directed just fine, but this one, oh man, they had the sauce. They had the sauce. So Ruby and Conrad fall for each other because Conrad has turned on his charm for his own personal gain, and Ruby desperately needs someone to process her trips with the doctor with. Like, seriously, Ruby, you should have just got like a therapist or something. This is a bad dude.
Do not trust this man.
But this next sequence where Ruby and Conrad fall for each other, it's all lovey-dovey. I was going to put in the bad section of this video when I was watching the episode for the first time because it felt a little bit cringy, it felt a little bit on the nose, it felt a little bit forced. We only get introduced to Conrad at the start of the episode, and then 20 minutes in, all of a sudden Ruby has this boyfriend. The dialogue felt a bit on the nose, but then there was the big twist. Because there's always a twist at the end or the middle of the episode. And this twist was the first twist that didn't get spoiled for me this season. Last week, the midnight twist got spoiled for me. This week, I had no idea what was happening when we were going into it. But Conrad is part of a hashtag exposed unit group called Think Tank. He's the leader on it, and he is hell-bent on exposing unit for all the lies and misinformation they're spreading and how they're using taxpayer dollars to put everyone in this state of paranoia saying aliens are real. And his entire relationship with Ruby was fake, so as soon as that happened, I immediately forgave all of the cheesy and on-the-nose dialogue and how it felt forced, because it was forced, it wasn't real. And that's really messed up because Ruby trusted him and confided in him and told him things that no one else knows, and now it's just going to play into her PTSD. I'd be surprised if Ruby Sunday will ever trust anyone ever again. And just a side note, I love the reference of the Cybermen and the Sycorax and the Yeti in the underground. And this episode kind of contextualizes that the Doctor Who universe, like, you know, the people walking around are aware ever so slightly that aliens are real. Because it's not been very clear in RTD2 how much the general public knows about aliens. Like, do they know about a spaceship that crashed into Big Ben or the Sycorax or whatever? So it seems like the general public do know about aliens, which makes me slightly forgive the robot revolution more, because I don't know if you remember, but back in my review, one of my main criticisms was just how chillax Belinda is when robots come crashing into her room. Like, she doesn't run away, she has some like whippy dialogue with them. But I can slightly forgive that because I'm working on the assumption that she kind of knew that aliens already exist. I also really liked the fake Shriek costumes, because when I was watching the scene, I didn't think they looked, 100% convincing. When you're watching it, part of you's like, oh yeah, that's definitely just like a stunt actor doing this, but it's Doctor Who. You can kind of forgive it a bit, suspend your disbelief. But then when they were revealed to be with Conrad and the costumes just look like Halloween costumes, good Halloween costumes, but just, a rubber mask, I immediately forgave how kind of shoddy they look, because they're meant to look shoddy. They're not meant to look great. But they were still convincing by Doctor Who standards, which is a tough thing to pull off. So well done to the costume department on this episode. Really well done. What else did I like? I mean, there's some stuff that I didn't like, and we'll get into that in a second, but there was a lot to like about this episode. Like Unit, I really enjoyed Unit's inclusion in this story. I feel like Kate Stewart, in RTD2 especially, hasn't really had that much to do. She's just kind of been there. But this is by far Kate's best episode in RTD2, if not her best episode ever, question mark? Skipping all the way to the end when Conrad infiltrates Unit and he mentions Kate's father to Kate, you can see her get angry, being like, hey, be careful what you say about my father. And Kate goes a bit rogue and gives Conrad a taste of his own medicine and releases the Shriek on him. Absolutely unhinged move, but I enjoy seeing what Kate would get up to if pushed and the Doctor's not there. That was pretty good characterization for me. And this episode definitely made me more excited for the spin-off show that's coming, The War Between the Land and the Sea, where we'll see the return of Kate, where we'll see the return of Shirley and the hot soldier guy. Because that show will be written by Russell T Davies and co-written by Pete McTee. And I think this is Pete's best episode, by the way. He wrote Kablam, which I really enjoyed, and Praxis, which I didn't enjoy as much. But Lucky Day definitely stands out for Pete. And before I get onto the bad, one thing I really enjoyed was at the end when Conrad and the Doctor have their little face-off in the TARDIS. Ncuti's delivery in that scene is perfect. He's mad, but he's reserved. I absolutely love it when the Doctor is annoyed without kind of going berserk, and Ncuti is absolutely capable of towing that line really well. I kind of wish we saw more of that from Ncuti's Doctor. Now, I know that was a lot of compliments, but the episode was not perfect. Let's talk about the bad. From some of the marketing this episode, I kind of thought that Ruby and Belinda were going to interact, and I'm just an absolute sucker for when the new companion meets the old companion. That's always a fun scene, and I feel like these two characters, I'd love to know if they get along or not. But the entire season arc for this season is that Belinda is trying to get home to 2025, and the TARDIS can't land in 2025, which is fantastic as a story arc, but definitely hinders you if you were going to set episode 4 in modern day 2025, meaning that the Doctor and current companion Belinda can't be a part of this story. Thus meaning we basically get one less episode with Belinda, and we only have 8 episodes this season. So this episode kind of feels like it would have been better placed at the end of season 1, like the Doctor had to go somewhere. But I suppose there were already too many Doctor Light episodes in season 1. Maybe this episode could have been something with Belinda. I don't know. I guess it's a double-edged sword for me because I'm so happy with this episode. I'm really happy with what they did with Ruby's character, but it does feel like the season arc kind of came to a grinding halt for a second to tell this other story. I was impressed with how they were able to kind of tie the Doctor and Belinda into it at the start, but we don't progress the season. The Shriek looked great, was a little bit spooky, not as spooky as last week, but it was very underutilized on purpose. Like the monster the entire episode basically is just in a cage. It's fine, it's locked away. The real monster was Conrad. Do not trust that guy. And the third act of the episode I felt like could have worked a little bit better. I just think Conrad's motivation could have been more clearly explained. From what I understand, from what I took from the episode as a kid, he was kind of genuinely interested in alien life, and then he had a job interview at Unit 8 years ago, and that went badly, and Kate was like, hey, don't trust him. And that's kind of all we're given. I think I would have liked to have seen more of the unraveling of Conrad's mind as to why he's so hell-bent on exposing Unit. Like how in The Incredibles, Syndrome is such a fan of Mr. Incredible, and then eventually he meets Mr. Incredible, and it's nothing like what he expects, and then he is hell-bent on killing all superheroes. I think I just would have liked to have understood Conrad's mind a bit more, because we spend the first half of the episode where we're basically being lied to by Conrad, and then the latter half of the episode we're like, oh, he's full evil. I just want to know why he's gone full evil. What was it in the interview that made Kate not trust him? And it's one thing to not get a job, but it's another thing to go after the company you didn't get a job from. I just think that idea could have been explored a little bit better. And then we get Mrs. Flood at the end, of course, and I'm like, sure, whatever. As I've said before, that season arc I'm really not interested in. I just want to get Belinda home. But she does say that she's the governor, which is I don't think she's said that before, and it makes me believe that she might be the boss that Beep the Meep mentioned all the way back in 2023. So her inclusion in this episode is fine. It's expected. But if the Mrs. Flood thing doesn't pay off in the finale, I feel like it's just going to tamper future rewatches of these stories. But with all that being said, Lucky Day isn't perfect, but it's bold and weird and gave Ruby the spotlight that she so desperately needed in season 1. I really enjoyed seeing a darker side of Unit and Kate's character, and this is probably one of the better Dr. Light episodes I've ever seen. And Lucky Day is a welcome entry to a pretty stellar season so far, so I will give this episode a 7 out of 10. In Lagos, the mysterious barber reigns supreme. The Doctor discovers a world where stories have power, but can he stop the spider and its deadly web of revenge? Oh boy, do I have some stuff to say about this one. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and that cameo, of course. But let's start with the good. Just getting right to the point, the thing I love the most about this story was the concept itself. It is such a strong concept. I feel like the idea of an engine run on stories is so Doctor Who and so clever, but the real chef's kiss for this, the real cherry on top, is setting this story at a barbershop. I just think the barbershop is a perfect location because that's the place that people go to tell their stories, to make small talk, to make friends, to make connection. And I was truly not expecting that from this episode, which is insane because the title is The Story and the Engine. How could I not see that? But I just thought that was absolutely genius and such a strong concept and a welcome concept to the world of Doctor Who. And another huge win for me this episode was Ncuti Gatwa himself. What a performance this episode. Sorely missed last week in Lucky Day because that was a Dr. Light episode, but man, Ncuti needs more scripts like this. We really got to see the range that Ncuti has in this episode. We got to see a more playful, fun side, especially when he's going through the market. He's having an absolute blast. I didn't even think Ncuti knew the cameras were rolling at that point. I think he was just having fun on set. But then we also got to see the rage of Ncuti. He's just a phenomenal actor, and I'm glad that he has been the Doctor. And I swear there was an interview with Ncuti just after he got cast as the next Doctor, and he said one of his bucket list items was to have a Doctor Who episode set in Africa. I swear I remember hearing about that. And here we have it. And it's just the perfect story to set in Africa because the barbershop is such an important part of African culture as well. I really do think that this was a powerful story and will go down as one of Ncuti's personal favorites that he's ever filmed. And something that did not go unnoticed for me was the set design this episode. They really poured some money into the sets for this episode because they kind of had the three main sets. They had the marketplace, which was massive, and they had like 80 extras on the day or something. It was mental, but it looks incredible. I was wondering if they were doing location shootings for this episode because it looked so good, but no, they just filmed that in Cardiff, in freezing Cardiff. I thought the barbershop set was perfect as well. And they had like the engine room, which was all sci-fi and very cool. Yeah, absolute props to the set dressers this episode. They really must have poured some money into it. And they definitely poured some money into the CGI this episode because that spider thing looked so good. So this episode was not written by Russell T Davies. It was written by Anua Ellams, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yeah, Anua Ellams. And I just thought he did a really solid job for his first Doctor Who episode ever. And he did something that I think every writer should do. If I was writing a Doctor Who episode, I would do this too. He actually cameos in the episode as one of the people in the market. If I ever had the privilege of writing a Doctor Who episode, you know for damn sure I'd be in that episode, no matter how small the part. So well done, Anua. I hope you set a trend. But speaking of people I was not expecting to see in this episode, let's talk about it. Spoiler alert. Joe Martin makes an appearance in this episode, the fugitive Doctor. That cameo was absolutely crazy, and genuinely, I was not expecting it. It was a very, very welcome surprise. And it kind of towed the line of feeling out of place, but I think it worked. Regardless, I was shocked. I gasped. I know I'm just rambling and listing off things I like about the episode, but my thoughts, it's all still pretty scattered in my head about what I liked about this episode. I really love when Doctor Who does an Earthbound story that's not in the UK. We actually travel outside the UK, and what an episode to be set in Africa. And I hope that this, is another trend that continues, and we can finally get a Doctor Who story set in Australia. I don't want a brief cameo of Sydney. I want a whole damn story set in Australia. Because there are so many things you could do in Australia. Like, we have such a rich Aboriginal history here that I really feel like, there could be a beautiful story in there. So anyway, hashtag crispy for showrunner. What else? Mrs. Flood was in this episode. She was bearable, by far the most bearable cameo she's had this season. So good job, Mrs. Flood. The direction was really solid this week, and particularly I want to highlight the shot where they're going through the maze, like trying to find the engine room, and the shot just kind of panned, and it's like a looking down shot. Oh boy, cinema. Chef's kiss. And I think I'm just really enjoying the risks that this season is taking because it's only 8 episodes long, but we have had such a variety of episodes this season, and they've all been pretty good. We are getting bang for our buck. But anyway, that was me telling you a bunch of things I really, really liked about this episode, but there were a few gripes for me in this episode. So let's talk about the bad. Now, the guest cast are great. They were really, really good. I liked their chemistry. I liked everything about them, but they were severely underutilized this episode. The missing people, they're called missing for a reason. They're barely in this episode. A few of these actors were actually in Anua Ellams' show, what was it called? The Barbershop Chronicles. And obviously the story in the engine drew heavy inspiration from that play, and some of the actors were in that play. So this cast I truly thought had chemistry, but they were barely in it. I think one of the standout characters for me was Omar. I think that's such an interesting relationship that he had with the Doctor. Like, this was the the Doctor's safe space. I really like that. I just would love to see more of Omo. But I understand in 50 minutes you can't really get that. The sheer scale of the cast was to their detriment because it didn't allow for, time with each of the characters, really. It was kind of zipping past pretty quick. And it's actually interesting that one of my criticisms is, the guest cast was too large. There were too many people on screen, because that's like one of my most common critiques of the Jodie Whittaker era. A lot of her episodes, the guest cast was too large and we just kind of had these one-dimensional characters. And it's funny because in doing research for this video, I stumbled across an interview from the Hashtag show where Russell T Davies was a guest on it. And Russell revealed that Anua had been working on a script for the Chris Chibnall era. So I think this episode was supposed to be like in flux, a different version, but the same core idea.
I went and saw a play of his at the National Theatre in London called Barbershop Chronicles, and something about it just made me think, oh, that man should be writing Doctor Who. And then it turned out I was right. I came out, I made inquiries, and it turned out he'd been developing a Doctor Who episode with my predecessor, Chris Chibnall.
But let's talk about the villain, the barber. I think this actor is phenomenal and gave it everything. I really was compelled by his performance. But I think in order to fully appreciate the character, you really have to pay attention to the dialogue, because if you miss it, I don't think you'll understand what's going on, and I think that happened to me on my first viewing. Because there's a scene where the barber's like, oh yeah, I'm Anansi, I'm Dionysus, I'm Loki, the god of stories, and like lists off, I'm all of them, I'm every god of stories. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. But then I think I kind of missed the following bit where, the Doctor laughs and is like, you're not any of those because I've met all of you. And he's like, okay, you got me. I work for the gods. I'm the one that writes down their stories and shares them with humanity. And I'm the one that created this nexus, this gigantic web that connects cultures and ideas. And it is a brilliant concept. Like, that is so cool. But I think I just missed it. So that's probably more on me than anything. But yeah, I think I kind of missed that his motivation was to get revenge on these gods that had done him so wrong. And Abby, I thought, was a really interesting character, but once again, I think slightly underutilized. I would have liked more time with this character. But there's only 50 minutes of screen time. But Abby is actually the daughter of Anansi, who was one of the gods that the barber said that he was, but he's not. She and the Fugitive Doctor have beef because the Fugitive Doctor abandoned her. I think there was a lot going on there, and I think I would have liked to have spent a bit more time kind of explaining and exploring that. And yeah, I think the second act of this story really suffers because of it. But one thing that I definitely did predict in this episode, as soon as they introduced the engine that eats stories, I was like, well, this episode is definitely going to end with the Doctor overloading it with his stories, his never-ending story. The story of the Time Lord known as the Doctor is a beautiful story, one that I've been watching for many, many years now. So I very much called that that's how the day was going to be saved. It was very Rings of Akaten vibes. But my biggest criticism of this episode is, what's one of the space babies doing in the episode? What are you doing here? We left space babies behind last year. I don't want any part of space babies to come back in the finale. Space babies and I have beef because that episode was the one that I was really excited to show all my friends, and I just don't think it's the strongest season opener Doctor Who's ever had. So what are you doing here, little space baby? Huh? Are you Mrs. Flood? The story in the engine was a high concept episode that truly allowed Ncuti Gatwa to shine more than he usually does. Whilst I don't think it's flawless, it really did take some big swings, and I think the story had a lot of heart. There was a lot of heart this episode. With that being said, I will be giving the story in the engine a 7.5 out of 10.
Hello and welcome to the Interstellar Song Contest Review.
The Doctor's mission to return Belinda to Earth brings them to a space station song competition. What starts as entertainment turns into a fight for survival. I was very excited for this one, but slightly nervous. And I will say I watched it as soon as it dropped on Disney Plus here in Australia because I knew there were going to be some big things in it, and boy oh boy, there were some big things in it. And as always, I've got some good and I've got some bad to say about the episode. So let's start with the good. This right here is possibly one of the coolest visual sequences I have ever seen in Doctor Who. That was horrifying and stunning. All of those bodies being flown up into space seems really, really dark for an episode called the Interstellar Song Contest. And this episode very much feels like, oh yeah, it had Disney money, didn't it? That's right, they did the Disney deal. And it really comes through this episode. But I'm not going to beat around the bush here because one of the coolest things, and something I genuinely did not expect for this episode at all, was the return of Susan Foreman, the Doctor's granddaughter, one of his first companions, the first companion. I have been dipping my toe into classic Doctor Who, and there might be some stuff coming up later this year for that, winky face. But having Susan Foreman back in Doctor Who after decades is so damn cool. It's so damn cool. Carol Ann Ford is one of the foundations as to why Doctor Who worked and why Doctor Who is here today. And so I was annoyed when they didn't bring her back in the 60th. I was annoyed when they mentioned her in season 1, but now they've finally done it, and it's in an episode called the Interstellar Song Contest, which is mental. So I was very happy with this cameo appearance. I really hope it leads to something more. And another thing I loved is that the vibes were high this episode. The vibes were great. It is loud and fun and in your face and kind of, reminds you like, oh, the Doctor and Belinda, they are time travelers. They are going to see some cool touristy things, and the Interstellar Song Contest would be a cool thing to see. And it's also worth mentioning that this is the first episode written by Juno Dawson. And Juno has been in the Doctor Who sphere for a while now. She was a host on the Doctor Who podcast, and she was supposed to write an episode for Class in Series 2 that never came about. I'm happy that finally Juno got a chance to write an episode of Doctor Who, and boy oh boy, did Russell T Davies be like, also, we need to include Susan and that massive twist at the end, which I'll talk about later because I'm not sure how I feel about it. But anyway, let's just list off a few more things I liked about this episode. Ncuti Gatwa has once again proved to me that season 2 is much better for him than season 1, because this episode really gave him a lot to deal with. He was faced with the thought that, oh my gosh, Belinda is dead. I presume she's dead and floating in space. And he goes bad, and he's really pushed to his limits, and he wants to torture this guy 3 trillion times. That's not very Doctor-like. It's one of the more consistent narratives that we've had, especially in New Who. It reminds me of when Amy said in A Town Called Mercy, like, Doctor, how long have you been traveling alone? Because the role of the companion is not to be understated, because they kind of, not only are they there to have fun with the Doctor and see these beautiful sights of the universe, but they also keep the Doctor in line and accountable. And you can see as soon as Belinda rocks up and the Doctor is torturing this guy, he's like, oh my gosh, I've actually gone too far, haven't I? I really have. And one of my initial criticisms for this episode was like, oh, I feel like it's a bit out of place that the Doctor would like go full torture just because he thinks that Belinda's dead. But sure, he has that to justify why he's so angry. But they throw in this line that I was not expecting. The Doctor's like, oh, my people on Gallifrey died of a genocide, and just hearing those 3 trillion people that potentially could die, it triggered me, and he got mad. Huh? Oh my goodness. Russell T Davies has a knack for taking the stuff that Chibnall did and kind of set up, but Chibnall never really did a lot with it character-wise, like the Timeless Child. And now, of course, the events at the end of Spyfall, where it's revealed that the Master was so mad that he had, some of the Doctor's DNA in him that he decided to kill every Gallifreyan. And that's never really explored in the Chibnall era. But here it is here, set in stone, being like, yeah, the Doctor's pretty mad about that. I also really thought that the side cast were much stronger this week than last week. Everyone had their roles, and I was able to understand each of their motivations in this episode. And I also thought that the villains were quite good. I was really worried that they were going to be one-dimensional, but there was a big surprise in there for me. And it's so high concept that their planet of Helia and the Helians were purchased by a corporation so that they can make honey sweetener or honey flavoring. That's so mental, but this is with Doctor Who. You can do anything. And yeah, I'd be annoyed at that too. Probably wouldn't go as far as they did. I just really enjoyed the motivation there. And I also just love seeing the Doctor and Belinda have fun. It was really nice to see them have fun. I really loved the scene where Belinda was talking about, how her parents used to let her stay up late watching Eurovision if she had brushed her teeth and got into her pajamas. I was like, that just feels like a real human thing. When I was a kid, I used to remember being like, we could watch The Simpsons if we had done all our homework, we were showered and, had our teeth brushed, and we were ready to go to bed straight after The Simpsons. So I don't know, I just felt like I related to that on some weird level. And speaking of Belinda, it is nice to see that she got to do something this episode. I think that she was quite sidelined last week. But this episode, she kind of held her own against the Doctor. She was worried. She was like, I don't know where the heck I am, but she really did well for herself and once again kept the Doctor accountable. And then there was that beautiful scene at the end where Belinda's like, hey, Doctor, I think you're wonderful. I think you're fantastic. And that's really, really nice, because I think we needed that, because the entire season has been, please get me home. But this is a nice thing for her to be like, but actually, I think you're a great person and I am enjoying my time with you. That's really beautiful. But it sounds like we can get to May the 24th. We can get Belinda home because the Vindicator has served its purpose. I think this might be the last week for the Vindicator. Thanks, brother. We appreciate your service. Thank you. Vindicator, I barely know her. And one last thing, the Doogadoo singer, 10 out of 10. Murray Gold, you've done an excellent job. Murray Gold created this character. Doogadoo will go on to be one of Doctor Who's greatest foes. Okay, let's talk about some stuff that I didn't quite enjoy as much. Let's talk about the bad. The Rani. Okay, very interesting. Now, as soon as Mrs. Flood appeared on Christmas 2023, everyone in my comments, including myself, said, oh, this might be the Rani, because her famous line of, oh, never seen a TARDIS before, makes it sound as if she's a time lady or has some knowledge of TARDISes, obviously. So that so much didn't surprise me. That's cool. But what did surprise me was a bi-generation. I did not think we would be seeing a bi-generation. I feel like I've made it pretty clear in the past, especially on my podcast, Who's There, that a bi-generation is just not for me. I don't really like bi-generation that much. Sorry, Russell. It's not something I subscribe to. Unlike this channel, which is something you should subscribe to. Please, it's free if you just do it. Please, right now, subscribe. I'd very much appreciate it. And I can prove to my parents that YouTube is a thing I can do, and it's sustainable. And I feel like this was a note at the end of Juno's script being like, oh yeah, and there's also going to be like a post-credit scene where Mrs. Flood bi-generates into the Rani. Oh, they're both the Rani. One's a Rani and the other one's the Rani. But the new Rani that will be played by Archie Panjabi, I think will be a fantastic Rani and a fantastic villain. But I just think there's other ways we could have done that scene. It all happens so quickly. It doesn't look like Mrs. Flood is particularly hurt when she's regenerating. But my main criticism, because with Mrs. Flood and Anita Dobson's acting, she can be quite intimidating. Her performance in, I think it's The Legend of Ruby Sunday or whatever, she is so intimidating in that scene, and I was like, wow, I can't wait for her to be a villain. But from this scene, the bi-generation scene, it seems that she is almost like a servant to this new Rani. I just really hope they don't waste Anita Dobson being a villain and she's just sweet old Mrs. Flood still, but she's the Rani. I just think that Anita Dobson is such a powerful actress that she really can hold her own and doesn't need to play second string to this person that we've only seen for one episode. The Mrs. Flood mystery has been going for 2 years now. And now she's playing second string. But I could be proven wrong next week because I hope that the banter between Archie and Anita is really good. But we'll see. But in regards to the Rani, I am excited for the Doctor to face off against another Time Lord that's not the Master. Thank God. And the other criticism I have is I'm just wondering when this episode was written, because I'm not quite sure of the messaging it's trying to get across with the parallels to Eurovision. I don't really talk politics on this episode at all, but it feels like this episode was trying to say something about Eurovision, and I'm not quite sure what the message is there, or if that message predates all of the recent controversies with Eurovision. So I just think maybe there should have been some clarity there if the episode is really trying to say something, but it might just be open to interpretation. The Interstellar Song Contest is a loud, powerful, and surprisingly memorable episode of Doctor Who. Whilst I didn't necessarily enjoy the twist ending, the episode holds its own and is a ridiculous amount of fun. I am going to give the Interstellar Song Contest a 7 out of 10. Traps are sprung and old enemies unite as the Doctor and Belinda finally arrive home to find a very different world. Can the Doctor see the truth before midnight arrives? I've got some good things to say about this episode and definitely some bad things to say about this episode. So let's start with the good. Look, I am a sucker for a parallel world, a pretend world, a dream world, and this episode definitely had that. Throughout the season, we've seen Belinda and the Doctor become really close friends, but then in this episode, we see them as a married couple, which just feels so off. There is something so jarring about that, and it's really nice to see Ncuti and Verida really showcase their acting talent by having to pretend to be this, mundane, everyday, happy couple when they're not. So I thought that was good and really strange and a really fun way to set up this episode. Conrad from Lucky Day is back and he's doing all these broadcasts on the TV. He seems to be one of the only things that's on TV, really. And he is constantly doing this live stream, you know, kind of doing all this propaganda about Doctor Who. But the Wish World is from his imagination. So basically, the Rani have captured him and have been like, hey, you know, your task is to make this imaginary world. And it was very much like Series 10 Lie of the Land-esque, this episode, where, you know, the Doctor is the one doing these broadcasts to the people with all this propaganda, and the monks have kind of rewritten history so that every human achievement the monks have kind of taken credit for, and, you know, there's like the thought police. There were police in this episode, like actual police, and you could have the police called on you if your husband's having doubts. Call this number. But the difference between Lie of the Land and Wish World is that the Doctor, for the most part, for a lot of the episode, is still kind of under the spell of this Wish World. In Lie of the Land, it's pretty clear that he's like playing along with the monks, like going along with their game. In this, the Doctor really does believe that he's married to Belinda and has a daughter named Poppy, and then things start to crumble from there. So I like it when the Doctor is vulnerable, or a plan, an evil plan, is working and the Doctor's a part of that. And I truly think there's something like underlying and really dark about how in Conrad's Wish World, in his ideal world, that, you know, mums and dads, they love each other and they love their kid. Because in Lucky Day, it's heavily implied that his upbringing was really rough. You know, his mum used to hit him. And the subtext there is that he came from quite a broken home. So I think it's interesting that in his made up world, he's like, no, mums and dads should love each other and they should love their kid because he never got that. But hey, that was just a random thought and some of the insight you can expect from this channel. So if you want to subscribe, that would be fantastic. It's free and it just takes a moment, and we make videos on Doctor Who all the time, so please consider subscribing. Thank you. One of my favorite things whenever Doctor Who does like a parallel world or a dreamscape, a dream world thing, is the tells that, oh, this isn't real. Like in Last Christmas when they're doing the book check, where words on the same page in the same book don't match. You're like, oh, that's a dream. But for this world, the tell that, oh, this isn't a real place was the mugs on the table. They just fall through whenever you have a doubt about this reality. I thought that was a really fun concept. I love the shot in Belle and John Smith's kitchen where they open it up and one cupboard is just full of mugs. So this is obviously a regular occurrence that happens. Everyone's got these orange bins out the front, and in them is just the remnants of all these coffee cups. So obviously in this world, a lot of people just have their doubts. Now let's talk Space Babies. If you've been following this channel for a while, Space Babies to this day is probably my least favorite Ncuti Gatwa episode and one of my least favorite Doctor Who episodes in general. So I was worried about what they were going to do with Poppy, but I must say, this is Poppy's best performance to date. I'm truly intrigued to see what happens with Poppy because this could go one of two ways. It seems like she's going to be a big part of the next episode, you know, the final episode of the finale. So I'm a bit worried about that. But for this episode, Poppy, you were fine. You did great. My main criticism with Space Babies was how jarring that their mouths moving looked. It was strange. But it seems like they didn't do that this episode, apart from the baby at the start that went ha 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 ha. More on that baby later. Ruby Sunday is back this episode. She was excellent in Lucky Day, and so I was excited to see Ruby Sunday again. Her first scene with the Doctor, or John Smith, I should say, was really interesting, where she's like, hey, are you the Doctor? And the Doctor's like, why are you calling me that? I love that kind of stuff, especially when we're in a dreamscape and someone's like, I think this is all fake. It's only briefly mentioned, but I think the reason that Ruby knows this is fake is because she has also lived through the events of 2025 in the episode 73 Yards, and that was like a fake world. That was like an alternate timeline thing. Doctor Who's a weird show. But because of that, she kind of sees the bigger picture and knows that, oh, something's up with this place. But Ruby goes and finds Shirley again. It's really nice seeing Shirley back in Doctor Who. But also, one of the more dark themes about this episode is the fact that Conrad, who is not a very nice man, he's the one that conjured up this world, and people with disabilities really don't fit into that world. And so Shirley has this kind of safe haven with people that Conrad doesn't view as important, and it's very sad. It's really quite emotional. And also, fun fact, my boy and fellow YouTuber Thary's was in this scene. He's in this episode. Tharies, you're an absolute legend. Shout out to you. But that's truly some of Russell's like darkest writing. But because Conrad doesn't really view them in his ideal world, which is all types of messed up, they too kind of go, oh no, something's up with this world. Something's not quite right. And let's talk about it. The Rani. I recently watched my first ever Rani episode before going into Wish World for a video that you'll see in a couple months' time. And I've got to say, Archie as the Rani absolutely crushed it. I really enjoyed this performance. Strong performance. She's won an Emmy, but there was a massive revelation at the end of this episode, and it sounds like next week they're really going to try and cram a lot into next week. So I hope that Archie, well, the Rani, isn't kind of swept to one side, because I really want to spend more time with this Rani. What else did I like this episode? The set design is probably the best set design I've seen of all of season 2. Like the Bone Palace, hello. Entire set looked magnificent. It was huge and so detailed. And it had a disco ball in the middle. I mean, there's not much to hate. I also really liked how they turned the unit set into this office jobs 1920s looking thing. I love it when you see a familiar setting kind of turned on its head. And so of course the Doctor is working at unit, or it's like an insurance thing, even though it did give me massive WandaVision vibes. Actually, this whole episode kind of gave me WandaVision vibes, because it's a dream world and there's like, you know, there's a happy couple and a kid. Yeah, this is basically WandaVision, isn't it? But I will say, if Wishworld's job was to get me excited for next week, it has. But the episode is not without its flaws. Let's talk about the bad. The Rani's motivation in this is absolutely wild. Like, how did Russell come up with this? The villain's plan is to steal a god that is an infant, and it's the god of wishes, and get this baby to somehow grant Conrad his wish of making this imaginary ideal world. And Conrad thinks that's it. Conrad's like, wow, this is such a fun plan. I get to make my ideal world. But the Rani is counting on people within that imaginary world to doubt the world around them, to doubt everything, to question everything, because the more people doubt, the more the world will crumble. And she wants the world to crumble, because if the world crumbles, then we get to see the underverse, the under-universe, whatever the heck that's about. Because in the underverse is Omega. That is mental and quite hard to follow and absolutely bombastic. I appreciate Russell taking big swings, but I think that might have been like, that's such a convoluted plot. But if that's the only way to get to the underverse, sure. But I truly think that this episode is a very hard watch for a casual viewer, because you've got the returning Rani, we've got a mention of Omega, we've got Susan returning, we've got Rogue returning, we've got a space baby returning. And I understand it's a finale, I get it, but this, it truly feels like, you know, this is a finale for a 4th series, after we've teased the underworld, after we've teased the return of Omega. As soon as they mentioned Omega, I was like, wow, okay, we're really doing everything next week, aren't we? So I hope it pays off. I truly hope it pays off. And I just mentioned Rogue, whilst it was very nice to see Jonathan Groff back on our screen, even though it looks like he filmed it in his bedroom. He basically sent a message that was, tables don't do that. I think that was what he said. I've only seen the episode the once, but he said, tables don't do that. And then in the next scene, the Doctor's got all the coffee mugs on the table, and whenever he doubts something, one of them slips through. Which is cool, which is great. But I think that Rogue cameo would have been so much more satisfying if, say, it was in Lux or the Robot Revolution or something like that. If there was like a mysterious message, like a screen popped up and he just said, tables don't do that. And we had an entire season leading up until this point where we're like, oh, that's what Rogue meant, instead of it being like, oh, tables don't do that, and then in the next scene, that entire thing is resolved. Because truthfully, I think the Doctor probably could have got there without Rogue's help. Maybe, I don't know. Another one of my major gripes, I mentioned it last week, and my fears have come true, is that Mrs. Flood is absolutely swept to the side. I really like Anita Dobson as an actress. I think she is a powerhouse. I think she's absolute great. And in this episode, she just makes a sandwich. She is absolutely subservient to the Rani. So whilst I didn't enjoy this episode, there is a chance that next episode they really could do something interesting with this bi-generated Rani. Because we got to see when the Doctor bi-generated, he kind of got along with his former self. But in this one, they seem to have this banter that they don't necessarily enjoy each other's company. They kind of just get along with each other. And so I'm truly hoping that Mrs. Flood is like,
No, I am the Rani. I am a big bad, and you're not my boss. I'm equally as much Rani as you. And there is some kind of confrontation. Maybe Mrs. Flood helps the Doctor get rid of this Rani or something. I don't know. Very much Return of the Jedi vibes, you know, throwing the Emperor down that tunnel. I haven't seen Return of the Jedi for a long time. I really don't want Mrs. Flood stuck making sandwiches next week, okay? Moving on, one of the more frustrating plot points of this episode was how good Ruby and Shirley were up until the last act of this episode, because Shirley's like, oh, here's an iPad. It's an old Earth relic. Oh. And then they, for the last 20 minutes of this episode, just watch this iPad and they don't try and infiltrate the tower somehow. They just kind of like, oh, that's bad, isn't it? I really thought that Ruby and Shirley were going to somehow infiltrate the tower or do something. Because the last 20 minutes, they're just like, yeah, that's not good, is it? And then the world ends. So are they dead? Are they going to be in next week? Because if they're not, it's just a waste of time, isn't it? They were so close. And one more thing, the final line of this episode is the Doctor saying, oh no, Poppy is real. Poppy is my daughter. So I'm inclined to believe that Poppy is a Time Lord and that Poppy might end up being Susan's mum somehow, which is absolutely just insane. But then it makes me question, who's the mum of Poppy? Because there is a throwaway line, or it might not be so throwaway line, from the Rani being like, oh yeah, we used to be lovers maybe. So what's all that about? Is Rani Susan's grandmother? I don't know. I don't know how Time Lords work. But anyway, Wishworld is an incredibly strange episode that plays with a lot of dream tropes while still being original. Although I have a few major gripes this episode, it could fix everything by next week. So for now, I will give Wishworld a 7 out of 10. Battle rages across the skies as the unholy trinity unleash their deadly ambition. The Doctor, Belinda, and Ruby have to risk everything in their quest to save one innocent life. So what I usually do is I start with the good of the episode, what I liked about it, and then go into the bad. But for this one, I think we're going to switch it up and we're going to start with the bad, and then I'll get to the good stuff. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about the 13th Doctor and the regeneration soon. Don't worry, that is all covered in this video. But one bad thing right off the gate is that I had to get up at 4 a.m. to watch this episode because for the most part for this series, I was able to watch Doctor Who when it landed on Disney Plus here in Australia at like 5 p.m. It was the best. I've never had Doctor Who on a Saturday night. But yes, getting up at 4 a.m. I was pretty used to that being an Australian Doctor Who fan because that's usually the time Doctor Who drops here in Australia. It'll be like 4 a.m. on a Sunday. But I had to do it for this channel, so please subscribe because I hope this proves that I am committed to this channel and getting this review out. So it's free if you subscribe. It's a free thing to do and a nice thing to do, so please do it. Okay, right out the gate, one thing that annoyed me is the handling of the Rani. I'm a big fan of the Rani as a character. I just recently watched The Time in the Rani for a video that you'll see very soon. And Archie and Anita are really, really good actresses, and I was excited to see them utilize this episode. And boy, oh boy, I was so disappointed, especially with Mrs. Flood. She gets like 0 screen time and 0 redemption. They set up something really interesting with the fact that these two bi-generated and don't get along with each other. I was like, there's got to be a moment where Mrs. Flood is like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of what you're doing, and somehow betrays the other Rani. But no, what happens is that the Rani gets eaten by Omega, and that's pretty much, that wraps up the entire story. That like, oh, the threat is eliminated. And that happens like halfway through the episode. You're like, oh, okay. And Mrs. Flood just grabs the time ring and is like, I'm out of here. See ya. And that's it. We've had 2 years leading up to this reveal of the Rani, and it's all wrapped up within half the episode. Mind-blowing. It has never explained why Mrs. Flood can break the fourth wall. It's never addressed. We'll never know. I think that will be one of Doctor Who's many unanswered questions. I did just briefly mention Omega. I was excited to see what they were going to do with Omega. Omega is like this big bad in classic Doctor Who with this incredible design, this very iconic helmet. And here, he's this big CGI thing. I should have seen it coming after Empire of Death. I'm like, yeah, we're doing the same thing. But he had even less time than Sutek did. He's there for a couple seconds. So it begs the question, like, do we really need
him to be included? Like, we made this entire wish world just to get to the Underverse so that we could see this guy, and then he eats the Rani and goes. If I look at these two designs side by side, I know which one I find more visually interesting. And the way the Doctor defeats Omega is by using the Vindicator, and I enjoyed, the Vindicator I'm glad is back because it's been such an integral part of this series, but it really does just look like a gun. And that's fine. But Russell a few years ago made a comment about how the sonic screwdriver looks too much like a gun or something in that vein, which is why Ncuti Gatwa's sonic screwdriver looks all different. But here the Vindicator clearly looks like a gun and acts like a gun and is used to defeat the enemy. So what are we doing? Shirley, Rose Noble, and Mel are all characters that I really, really like, but are severely underutilized this episode. And by underutilized, I mean they have like a couple of lines. I was so excited for the rematch between Mel and the Rani. I really thought that something was going to happen there, and they have like a very brief exchange, and then Mel's like not in the rest of the episode. It obviously is a finale, and there's a lot of characters involved. Like they bring Susan Triad back, and she's actually pretty good this episode. She actually does have a role, unlike Shirley and Rose and Mel. But there are just so many people in this episode that it definitely does feel overstuffed. And this episode is longer. It's like how long is it? It's like 1 hour and 6 minutes, which is, you know, a considerable bump up from the 45 that we're used to. But it still feels like it goes at a absolutely insanely fast rate to try and get through everything. Now let's talk about Conrad. Conrad is kind of like one of the bigger bads this season. We saw him in Lucky Day, and he's really not a nice guy. And the Rani brought him into this wish world. It's his wish world. He's imagined it, and he's a central figure as to why this reality is the way it is. And he's truly not a nice guy, but yet he seems to have gotten some kind of redemption arc. Like they redeem him slightly, or like they give him a happy ending, because Ruby makes a wish for him to go and have a happy life. So it's like we're seeing a version of Conrad who isn't the mean dude, but we've just seen him be mean for the entire season. And it's like, why does he get the happy ending? They play on the fact that his father wasn't a very nice guy, so I'm sure that there's something in that, but I feel like we could have explored that a little bit more as to the ethics of it all. Now, Belinda Chandra. If you asked me at the end of The Well where I thought Belinda Chandra was going to rank in like my personal favorite companions, I feel like she could have easily crept into the top 3. I really enjoyed the idea of this reluctant companion. She seemed a bit more self-assured. She works in healthcare. She's a very caring person, and you know, the reluctancy I just thought was such an interesting dynamic. But she's not really in Lucky Day. She's not really utilized in the story in the engine. In the Interstellar Song Contest, there's some good stuff there. And then in Wish World, she's like this imaginary person for a lot of it, so it's not the real Belinda Chandra. So for the first half of the season, I'm like, yeah, she's great. For the second half, she is severely underutilized, and she was absolutely underutilized this episode. I understand why, because she wants to be with Poppy, and she's like, well, I'm her mum, I should take care of her. Which is great. And, you know, it's a motherly instinct. Of course you want to take care of your child. But in doing that, it kind of eliminated her from the story of being able to get involved heavily in the plot. She kind of sits in a box for a substantial amount of this episode. So on the one side, I'm like, yeah, that's a very smart thing to do. Please be with your child. But at another time, it kind of... I just wish we had more time with Belinda. This 8-episode thing, we really don't get much time with her. But my final gripe with this episode was the fact that it is Ncuti Gatwa's last. We spent more time knowing that Ncuti Gatwa was going to be the Doctor than having Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor. Which is absolutely insane, because I was actually growing to quite like Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. In season 1, I wasn't quite sure where I sat with him. But season 2, I feel like did a lot with the Doctor. But this was it. He actually regenerated this episode. Which I think they kind of pulled off. So let's talk about the good. Anita is back from the Time Hotel? Hello? What? Never in a million years did I think we would see that character again, because she was the absolute highlight of Joy to the World, more so than Joy. She was an absolute delight, and I wasn't really expecting her to kind of fall in love with the Doctor. And then she found out that the Doctor liked Rome, and she was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go and marry someone else. But I enjoyed her inclusion in here, and I enjoyed the line where she was like, oh, I'm the hotel manager of this place, and I have the master key, so I could basically get into any door. And it's like, yeah, of course, if you worked at the Time Hotel and you were a manager, I guess you kind of do have access to all of time and space. It's a cool way to be a time traveler. And another compliment I will kind of pay to this season of like RTD2 is that it definitely feels more connected. This season feels way more connected than season 1 did, thanks to the Vindicator and Belinda, and now we're even linking into the Christmas special. I don't know if we've ever linked into a Christmas special this hard, but I think it's all the better for it. Ruby Sunday is strong in this. At the end of season 1, I was really not a fan of Ruby Sunday, but Lucky Day did a lot of heavy lifting, being like, oh no, she's actually a good character, and in this, she is a strong character as well. Probably, she does more than Belinda in this episode, which is a shame, but she does well. And one of the highlight scenes for me is when Ruby is realizing that, oh, the world is still not what it seems. Like I said it last week, I'm an absolute sucker for when someone realizes they're in a dream. And that scene where they're gradually like folding this jacket and it's getting smaller and smaller, and it's never really addressed. But as a viewer, you're watching this and being like, oh, something doesn't feel right here. And you're like, oh no, the reality is still warped and there are a few glitches. Now, this one may be controversial because it doesn't really make a lot of sense and it doesn't need to be there, but the 13th Doctor rocked up in this. And look, I understand it's very fan servicey, it's very time crash. But I loved it. I'm always a fan of Jodie. Her era is not necessarily my favorite, but Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, such good vibes, man. I've got a soft spot for multi-Doctor stuff, so it was a nice surprise, a genuine surprise that didn't leak. But it was awesome to see her again. I think she's a delight. It was like a little precursor to the regeneration. And I thought the reason for the regeneration was quite nice as well, because, you know, it was a life for a life. The Doctor sacrificed a lot of his regeneration energy into the TARDIS so that he could save the life of this wish-made daughter of his, Poppy. It's absolutely insane when I say sentences like that, and reminds me that Doctor Who is a bonkers show. But saving the little guy is what the Doctor does best. Like, in the end of time, the Doctor goes through this massive, massive thing with the Time Lords and the Master, but ultimately he regenerates to save his mate, Will. So I feel like Russell was definitely pulling on those strings for this episode, and weirdly enough, it worked for me. And Ncuti Gatwa's final line being, this has been an absolute joy, really didn't feel like his Doctor. It felt like Ncuti Gatwa being like, thank you, I've very much enjoyed my time here. That's what I got from that scene. I thought it was quite touching. But Billie Piper is the next Doctor? What? Well, kind of. In the credits, they don't credit her as the Doctor, so I'm not quite sure how she fits into all of this, but it was nice to have a genuine surprise regeneration, because they tried to do it back in 2022, but a lot of us were like, oh, I think David Tennant's probably reprising the role. But with this one, I'd never heard of Billie Piper reprising the role, so it was an actual surprise, and weirdly enough, I think this concept could work. Are the Doctor Who creative team running out of ideas? Maybe. Billie Piper is fantastic. I've seen both seasons of I Hate Susie, and she is brilliant in that, and I have no doubt that she would absolutely crush being the Doctor, but it will be strange seeing how she would play it differently to being the companion. Like, it's a completely different set of skills, but I think Billie Piper could definitely do it. So I think there's some really good stuff in this episode, but as I said before, with like the Rani being killed off halfway through, I feel like this episode is 2 episodes stitched together, and something happened behind the scenes, because bear with me now, tinfoil hats on. I really don't think Ncuti Gatwa was supposed to regenerate this episode, but something happened behind the scenes, whether he was like, actually, I don't want to return, or if the Disney deal is being pulled, or something like that. But I would put some money on that this was not the original ending for the episode. I feel like the original ending was going to set up, the Doctor wanting to find Poppy or something, which doesn't sound like that interesting of a season arc, but I feel like that's where they were going with it. But something happened and they had to do some reshoots, which was heavily talked about. They were doing some reshoots. And I really think the regeneration stuff was the reshoots. And the way they kind of like plonked Billie Piper's head on at the end makes me feel like Billie Piper filmed this like way after Ncuti filmed his regeneration scene. But there was that whole thing last year when Ncuti Gatwa was a guest on the Graham Norton show, and he was asked about Doctor Who, and like he was like, oh yeah, we're filming season 3 next year sometime. And that quote was mysteriously edited out of the episode, which just makes alarm bells for me, being like, oh no, Ncuti was under the impression that he was going to film a 3rd season, and something happened between now and then. But yeah, that's just my tinfoil hat on conspiracy theory that there's a different version of this story that maybe worked better and felt less convoluted, because you already had to accomplish a lot before you bring back the 13th Doctor and have a Doctor regeneration. Like it's a lot to achieve in an episode. But the future of Doctor Who is not certain. Is Billy Piper going to play the Doctor? Is Russell T Davies returning? Is he going to be showrunner, or is he going to act like a Kevin Feige type and we're going to get a new showrunner? Is Disney Plus staying on, or are the BBC going to produce it themselves? Anything and everything is possible, and that's exciting but scary. The Reality War was a huge, world-ending finale that you would expect from Russell T Davies. There's too many characters with a lot of twists and turns and maybe a returning face or two. I will give The Reality War a 6.5 out of 10. Is that harsh? Maybe. Whoa, you made it to the end of my review compilation. Thank you so much. Or you just skipped to this point to see my final thoughts, which is fine. But yeah, thank you for watching. So my scores are on the screen right now. I have rewatched every episode here. And let's have a look here. I think I'm going to take 0.5 off of the score of the Robot Revolution because I rewatched that recently. And the ending, it absolutely does not stick the landing. The OWL generator, the AI generator, is such a strange thing. It's implied that he's in pain, and yet the Doctor like kind of kills him. It's very strange. It's a very strange opener. It doesn't really act like an opener either. So it's just, I don't think it's one of the strongest episodes. It's probably the weakest episode of the season. Lux, I'm going to leave. I really enjoyed that episode. The Well, I'm going to leave as well. I think that is my favorite episode of this season. Lucky Day, I think I'm going to bump that up a whole point because editing my video, I realized just how positively I talked about Lucky Day. I think it's a surprisingly strong story and probably the underdog of this season. The story in the engine on rewatch, I think it's just a really beautiful story, so I think I'll add 0.5 to that. The Interstellar Song Contest, I think I'm going to have to take 0.5 off of that one because I really don't like how they handled the Doctor being cruel. I understand it as a concept, but there's never really like a payoff to it. Thought perhaps maybe in the finale it would be brought up, or the Doctor would be going too far and Belinda would be like, hey, remember when this happened last time? But no, it's never really discussed or talked about. And it's a complicated episode. Gosh damn it, my camera just died. But that's okay. I was pretty much done. I think that's my final ranking. I'll put that on screen right now. That's my final ranking for the entire season. It was a pretty strong season. It's one of my favorites, I think. I'm genuinely very curious to see what you guys think about it because I had a great time. Was it the strongest? No. Could it have been better? Definitely. But I think it was definitely better than season 1. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you in the next one. Allons-y!